Welcome to Capital Talk, a program we hope will have an impact on the future of Kenya, and now more than ever. Now, less than 24 hours since Finance Minister Amos Kimunya sat here on this bench and said he would rather die than quit or resign, well, he's resigned over the Grand Regency scandal, scam, whatever you want to call it. More questions being raised as to why he did that after he had so vehemently said he wouldn't resign. My guest today, and we told you all this week, we're going to talk about this Grand Regency scandal. My guest is the whistleblower himself. About 2 weeks ago, came up with what he called documentary evidence that there was a scam going on with the sale of the Regency. And he didn't stop there. Up until now, there's so much ground to cover, but it's only fair we hear his side of the story as the saga continues. My guest today, Lands Minister James Orengo. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
My goodness. Less than 24 hours ago, he sat right where you're sitting, and he said, I'd rather die than resign. What could have happened, Mheshimiwa?
I think the public pressure was just too much. Remember, he had a meeting in Kipipiri. Apparently, the whole object of that meeting was to rally members of parliament from Central Province or Central Kenya. He had about 5 members of parliament only. Then yesterday he had a meeting somewhere in Thika with about 14 members of parliament. Of course, there are many more members of parliament from Central Province. Again, they were only about 14, and they were not unanimous. There was a lot of disagreement out there. So there was a lot of public pressure. But I think in these circumstances and the way he made that statement that he would rather die than resign, I think the president must have intervened and read him the Riot Act. But it must also be remembered that, all along, Honorable Amos Kimunya has not been telling the truth to the public. And the lies were piling up one after the other. And he had just to break up.
And in the end, like you said, the president must have seen what was going on and decided what? Just cut off these links, or because it was going to get too ugly?
I think it was going to get too ugly. One, already the scheme that he was using, or the plan that he was using, or mobilizing people from Central Kenya, was not the kind of thing that the president would want to support. And I commend the members of parliament from Central Kenya, because they were being drawn into something that they should not have been drawn in. And it was all about, whether the Grand Regency was sold and transferred to a third party regularly and within the law or not. That was the question. Yeah. But for Honorable Kimunya now to go down in Kipipiri and trivialize the issue and putting an ethnic case when there was not one before the members of the public, I think that was outrageous, and it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Bottom line, it wasn't about Amos Kimunya, was it? It was about these documents that you got a hold of, and you decided this is not right.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us about it.
And Amos Kimunya was then the Minister for Finance. He was the one responsible for the docket. I was not going to against Honorable Kimunya. I was against the manner in which the whole transaction had been carried out and executed. There were several things wrong about that document. The agreement of sale, which was signed prior to the transfer, stated that the land and building was sold for about 2.9 billion shillings. When they presented the documents for registration to the Lands Office, the property was supposedly sold at 1.8 billion shillings. Now, the government lost over 50 million shillings just on that account. Because, this business of talking about that 2.9 billion shillings included, the furniture and other, movables. That was not, covered in the agreement. The agreement was 2.9 billion shillings for land and the buildings. So there was something wrong with that. If you look at the agreement, at the lease, the transfer or lease itself, there are many things that in an ordinary conveyancing lawyer would notice about 100 faults with it. One, there are alterations. There's a part in that transfer where the figure 1.8 billion shillings, 2.5 billion shillings is given as the consideration. and then it's cancelled without endorsement to the figure 1.85 billion shillings. That is wrong and should not be found in a legal document. Because at the end of the day, for somebody who is going to translate and interpret that document another year or 2 years down the line, what was the consideration? There will be a lot of court battles as to exactly what happened. There are procedures for disposal of government property and government assets. It was quite clearly those procedures were not followed. And even a cabinet paper was not presented before cabinet to discuss this particular transaction. Now it has been said that this was a government to government transaction. There are procedures for government to government transactions, and when they have financial implications or they relate to property, the Office of the Attorney General will have to be involved. You don't register a Kenyan company and call it a Libyan company. You don't register a company with Kenyans, so to speak, subscribing to the memorandum and articles of association and presenting themselves as Kenyans. And 6 months down the line, they say now they are Libyans. You do not find, in the worst case scenario, where the company, the nominal capital, not the issued capital, nominal capital is 100,000 shillings. And this company is a company now that owns an asset of 2.5 billion shillings or 2.9 billion shillings, whatever the figure is. It just doesn't add up. And the issued shares were only 2 at the time of the registration. And that was in the figure of 400 shillings, 200 shillings, per subscriber. So, on the face of it and with the documentation, it could not have been anything that, the government could be involved in, particularly when it concerned a substantial government asset. And then, the lawyer that was acting for the Libyan company, so to speak, which was locally incorporated and established, was a lawyer for Central Bank, was everybody's lawyer. Yeah. Now, in government transactions, whether you want to outsource other legal consultants, the lawyer on record always is the Attorney General. Even me, I'm a lawyer, I'm in the Ministry of Lands, but ultimately, whatever my legal opinion is on anything which has got financial or legal obligations, I must consult with the Office of the Attorney General. So there were many faults in the entire transaction and with the legal documents which were presented.
Did he do the right thing, Mheshimiwa, or was he holding on to a lifeline thinking that it might blow over?
Well, I think in the first place he thought, he will hold up on his own. And, even in Parliament you could see nobody rose up, including Uhuru, whom, I have the greatest respect for. But I think it was cowardly on his part to sit through, the parliamentary session during the debate of no confidence. And Uhuru is a senior member of Parliament. If he rose up, the speaker would obviously catch his eye. There's no major debate where the vice president, the prime minister, or any of the deputy prime ministers would be required to give a contribution, or they would want to give a contribution, and the speaker would not give them a chance. And of course, he didn't do it. But anyway, Honorable Kimunya, I think, wrongly assessed his position, thinking that he was indispensable, thought he would hold on, and then adopted this, rather tragic and fatal strategy of going back to his base and saying that this problem was not his problem, it was a community problem, which was not there in the first place.
Yeah. Tragic and fatal. Does that mean Kimunya's finished now?
Well, if the investigations are carried out and, it determines that really he did not, commit any wrong, then his fate will be like the other ministers who are serving even now, who had to step down during the NAC government. And even before the end of that tenure of that government, they were reappointed and served in that cabinet, and they are now in this cabinet. Yeah. So I think he's not completely finished. But I'd advise him, as somebody who has been in the political field, that a little bit of civility and a little bit of a spirit of brotherhood and, not being arrogant, and taking seriously every single member of parliament. That can help one achieve a lot of things in the floor of the House. And being, the Minister for Finance, who has to pilot many statutes, many motions through the House, he has that obligation to be in good and firm and cordial relations with the members of parliament.
Yeah.
You could hear a lot of members of parliament saying, "Oh, Muraria, we may have moved a motion against him, but he was still a good man." Which I don't think that ask any ordinary member of parliament would say about my friend Amos Kimunya.
In fact, you're suing him because he accused you of asking for a 3 million shilling bribe.
And look at that. And then at the end of the day, he said his source was an advocate by the name Aden, and that same advocate on that same day and the next day talked to the media and said all this was balderdash, it was trash. And again, that shows the mentality of Honorable Kimunya. With respect, you don't tell a lie about somebody in that way. I think being in public office requires higher standards. At the end of the day, one is forced to leave office or to resign, not because somebody has committed an offense, but in public life, higher standards are required. The public look at you with, a toothbrush. They come through with a toothbrush. And for that, I found it rather strange for him to say a thing like that. Why would I blow the whistle, if all I wanted was 3 million shillings? And Honorable Kimunya, he's not been part of my political history. I never knew him at all. Those days that we used to run around the streets here and fighting with the government of the day, the imperial presidency, and have colleagues who have stood firm in the struggle. They are my friends. I would never want to betray the things that we have struggled for together. And I would not wash up that down the drain just because of a little money. And I've, been in a position where people come to me even as a practicing advocate, thinking that other people may be compromised. And I go there and do those cases many times even pro bono. Yeah. So I cannot let him get away with this. And some of my lawyers are here already. Yeah. And we're going to meet in court certainly.
You've been fighting for a long time. You just mentioned that you were there the days of multi-parties, those early days. Saba Saba was a couple of days ago, and it just came and passed by. But that was a very significant moment. Where you stand right now with where Kenya has come. Are you happy with the struggle that you went through to get to where you are?
I'm not happy yet because we do not have a new constitution. We do not have a new constitutional order. The structures for an imperial presidency still exist. And anybody want to transform this leadership into a dictatorship can easily do it. Although the Grand Coalition arrangements make that to be absolutely impossible. So I think we still have some way to cover. And if the spirit of the accord works and we are committed to having a new constitution within the next 12 months, I'd be a very, very happy person. But a constitution is just a document. It is not enough in itself. We need men and women who stand for principles, who stand for values that they will never compromise on. I can tell you, and I started saying this from last week, when it comes to matters of principle, I stand as firm as a rock and I'm unshakable. I can never waver and change. Even the fact of being cabinet cannot compromise my position. And I've said, and I'll say tomorrow and the day after, if at any stage, even at the cabinet level, if I find that principles like collective responsibility would compromise my position, particularly on matters of justice and constitutionalism, I will rather quit cabinet. I'll rather quit being in government, but hold firm to those ideas that have shaped my life and which I cannot change.
Great. Mheshimiwa, I want to talk more about that. And also, what does this do to the Grand Coalition, okay? First, I want to take a break. My guest today, the unshakable MP from Ugenya, also He's the lands minister and the whistleblower in the Grand Regency scam, scandal, whatever you want to call it. The heads are starting to roll, and you are watching Capital Talk only on the award-winning station K24. We are back in a moment. Welcome back to Capital Talk. All this week, it's all about the Grand Regency scandal, scam, whatever you want to call it. My guest today, the whistleblower, Lands Minister James Orengo. So, Mheshimiwa, what does this do to the Grand Coalition? Is this a defining moment?
I think it's a defining moment, but I think it's a positive defining moment. If Honorable Kimunya would not have resigned, I think the coalition, for all intents and purposes, would have collapsed. But I think now we got a basis of saying the two principles, that is His Excellency Mwai Kibaki and Honorable Raila Odinga, are showing to the public that where there is need, to push people out, where there's need to, stand firm with the principles that founded the coalition, they will not waver. And I think for that matter, since in my view, I do not think Honorable Kimunya voluntarily resigned. I think he was talked to. To that extent, I think the president has to be commended because of going the extra mile in trying to persuade Honorable Kimunya to step aside, because he could see the dangers lying ahead. And also, he looked at the position from a humane situation instead of, just sacking him. He went through some motions of talking to him and making sure that there was no bad blood between, the general membership of the coalition.
Yeah.
And right thereafter, there was a meeting between the president and the prime minister. I think these are positive signals.
Is this scandal, this scam, is it deeper than a lot of people think? Because heads are starting to roll all over again. The ghosts of Goldenberg are coming up again. Is this deeper than we all think?
I still think it is deeper. Deeper in the sense that, it is emerging and we're being told. And it is also, embarrassing for me to say we're being told. But we've been told it was a government-to-government deal. The documentation that is in the public domain and within the circles that I operate in do not bear out that fact. All it shows is that the central bank had this transaction between itself and a locally incorporated company which had nominal shares to the extent of 100,000 shillings. And yet the involvement of the leadership, at the cabinet level and the governor of central bank, and we had moments when even other key members of government who should have known, when they were asked to give comments on the transaction, they were not very useful because they were kept away. They were not involved when they should have been involved. For example, when the agreement was reached between the central bank and the Libyan company, if I may call it for purposes of this interview, the board of central bank was not informed. The agreement and terms thereof were not approved by central bank. I think it will still be necessary to dig deep and get to the root of this transaction, because it will inform us on how to behave. And I think it's getting a little bit too late, because it is one after another. Goldenberg, Anglo Leasing, they are two brothers, and we don't know many other transactions which probably are still not in the public domain, but which may as yet come out.
Do we expect more heads to roll, Mheshimiwa?
Well, I don't know, but I think if a thorough investigations could be conducted, I think we should see a few more heads roll in central bank, in finance, in the lands ministry, and I think in other relevant government authorities who are involved in the transaction.
You put a caveat on the land. the land can be transferred between now and the end of the caveat?
No transaction can take place. Not even a charge, not even a transfer. And I took that decision the moment I came out with this matter. I put a caveat, which has been in place since last month. Also, we are considering calling up the title, and the Commission of Lands has powers to call for that title. And after consideration, it's quite possible we may come to the decision that is that title in relation to the ownership being vested in the company, that title may be revoked or cancelled.
What about the money that's now an NIC waiting to clear? What happens to that check?
Now, that is now between those who are party to the agreement. I cannot comment. That is a matter now between the Libyan Arab African Investment Company Kenya Limited and the central bank. They've got to go through the agreement that they signed, that in this kind of situation, what happens? If one side cannot pull the agreement through, what happens? Again, you may find that in that sale agreement, a lot of faults. For example, there was no currency protection for the Kenya government or the central bank in case by the time they paid, there were substantial currency fluctuations. There was no clause making provisions for dispute resolutions outside the framework of the courts, because not in such transactions it is always anticipated or contemplated that there may arise a situation which the parties in which the parties may want to provide for themselves a mechanism to walk out of the transaction. There was no such thing in the sale agreement.
Yeah. Have we seen the end of this the Grand Regency saga, Mheshimiwa, or is there more to come? Because we need to put this thing to bed and move on. Huh?
No, I think, and I said as much. I said the country cannot just concentrate on this. We got the Constitution, we got the Truth and Justice and Reconciliation Commission around the corner, and we got these other, ad hoc committees and commissions which are very important, in which we should focus our attention. But it would be tragic also if we do not learn from the mistakes we made. And that is why probably an inquiry is necessary. Not an inquiry for witch hunting, but finding out where faults may have, or wrongs may have been committed. Also, you must always find a way of punishing impunity. If something like this happens of such a magnitude, and the offenders go scot-free, then what you encourage is impunity at the highest levels of government, and that is not an example that you want, our 1 inch to, either emulate or learn from. The other day when we were in Githunguri for the homecoming celebration of Honorable Githunguri's victory, I think it was Kiambaa, yes. Honorable Githunguri said that what does it mean to the ordinary citizen who is arrested for stealing a chicken? That's the way he put it. And is put in prison for 5 years. And somebody who in their eyes has stolen so much. And all we can say is that we want, to forget about this and let the country move forward. It reminds me of an English sage who said, and these were the days, feudal days in England, when he said, laws are there for the guidance of the rich and the mighty, but for the obedience of the poor and weak. Literally saying that, the rich don't need the law. It is only to suppress the poor and to make them comply with the standards and the law set up by the rich, the ruling class.
Yeah. You've been fighting for justice for the last couple of decades in this country. Is this a good day for justice?
I think it's a good day because I think it is showing that the country will not, will not allow impunity. I think it's a good day. But it would be wrong for anybody involved to feel triumphant, I think also that can bring a lot of problems because this was not done for political purpose or political objective. We should not have victors mentality. And if we can be civil about all this that has happened, and all the time saying, even those who have wronged, even an accused person in court requires justice and fairness. Within that framework, I think we can say it's a good day for Kenya.
Are you going to continue being the whistleblower?
Well, I don't know whether that is sufficient work for me. but I can say if and when I encounter situations like this, in whatever circumstances, I'll not keep quiet. I'll not keep quiet. But I think there's a lot more work to be done there, and we need to approach it positively to build this great country.
This crop of MPs in the House, Mheshimiwa, this is a very determined, very, very outspoken lot. They are, when they smell blood, they go for the jugular. Is this good to see? Is this a new Kenya where people aren't scared anymore? Because, there used to be a time where people were really scared.
I like it. I like it. I've been in that parliament where standing up to say anything was very difficult. And when you said it, next day you are in a police station. You cannot get bail or bond, or you are charged for treason, or sedition, or you are placed in detention. But now with these changed circumstances, people are going to be more vigorous, and I like the mood in Parliament. I like a good fight in Parliament, and I look forward to it. I think it's not a bad thing, unless we want impunity to continue.
Mheshimiwa, keep fighting the fight.
Thank you, sir.
Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
My guest today, the whistleblower himself, Finance Minister James Orengo, says there's no room for impunity anymore, and he will continue blowing the whistle if and when he sees necessary, just so that this country can get back on track and we can concentrate on the things that need concentrating on. What a fascinating topic. The ghosts of Goldenberg and the Grand Regency scandal aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and the heads have just begun to roll. You have been watching Capital Talk only on the award-winning station K24, where we are all Kenyan all the time.